speakers on behalf of two colleagues, Dr. David Hunter and Dr. Doro House. And what I'm looking at is the use of television documentary review and group discussion for intercultural learning between nursing students in Glasgow and Singapore. So what we're looking at is a sort of cross-cultural education event for students based in Singapore and students based in Glasgow. So just a bit of a background on our programme. At the University of Glasgow, we offer a Bachelor of Nursing honours degree, and we also have a joint University of Glasgow and Singapore Institute of Technology 2-year honours top-up degree for Singaporean registered nurses who hold a diploma. So there were not many options in Singapore to do a degree, so nursing students who already have completed a diploma and have done some practice can apply and do a 2-year top-up. This is accredited by the Singapore Nursing Board, and this programme started in September 2016 with 55 students. And halfway through this 2-year programme, the students in Singapore come to Glasgow and do a 4-week overseas immersion programme, which is one of the highlights for the students, where they come to Glasgow, they go out with the district nurses, they do some time in hospitals, observing practice. They get a sort of cultural experience in Glasgow, going to visit things like our Loch Lomond and Edinburgh, and also just seeing, a different health system, as well as getting the sort of observational clinical placements in hospitals. So unfortunately in 2020, the overseas immersion programme was cancelled due to COVID. So our Singapore students were unable to travel to Glasgow, and at the same time, our first year Bachelor of Nursing students were unable to go out into practice. So students who were second year onwards were able to go out into practice and help with the COVID response, but not our first year students. So at that time, I was also supposed to go to Singapore. I normally travel out in May and teach a health and social policy module to these students. And at the same time, I teach a social policy module in Glasgow. So what we decided to do is move the teaching online, but we saw this as an opportunity to bring the students from both programmes together and run some live joint sessions. So that's kind of what we're talking about this afternoon. So what we did was we selected a documentary which is available on the BBC. It's called The People versus the NHS, Who Gets the Drugs? It's a documentary that is about expanding access to pre-exposure prophylaxis in the UK. So obviously PrEP is a drug that experts believe could end the HIV and AIDS epidemic. But in 2016, the NHS in England, after 18 months of consultation, made the controversial decision that they could not fund it. And this documentary is the story of the battle for PrEP on the NHS in England. So a legal fight which saw doctors and activists and AIDS charities come together to overturn the NHS decision. And part of the documentary also explores what the NHS is for and what it should be for when it was made in 2018. So students were asked in advance of the joint live session to watch the documentary. They were provided with guidance on how to view a documentary and what sort of some guiding questions, what to make notes of while they were watching the documentary, which is about an hour long. And then the live session was that we brought students together on Zoom, split them into breakout rooms where there was a mixture of Glasgow and Singapore students and a facilitator, so either a lecturer from Singapore or a lecturer from Glasgow. And they would essentially be student-led, but discuss questions about the documentary, looking at different opinions, looking at shared, developing some shared learning. And then at the end, we, brought the whole group together and had a brief sort of summary of the event, and then we followed up with a questionnaire on SurveyMonkey. So just some very brief statistics here when we look at HIV, and there's some similarities obviously between Scotland and Singapore. They've got a very similar population size. The number of people living with HIV in Scotland and Singapore is also very similar, and so is the number of diagnoses of HIV per year. But here there's also some differences. People in Singapore are more likely to be diagnosed with HIV at a later stage, and the transmission of HIV is different across different populations, Scotland having a higher transmission through drug injection, for example. And one of the things that, just going back a bit actually, so looking at HIV being of how HIV is acquired in men who have sex with men, in Singapore 49% and in Scotland 37%. It's useful to point out that homosexuality among men was illegal in Scotland until 1980, but in Singapore it is still illegal, and in March 2020 the Singapore High Court dismissed a legal challenge criminalising consensual sex between men. Prior to highlighting, choosing this documentary, we discussed with our staff in Singapore and our student body in Singapore about whether this topic would be sensitive, but there were no issues envisaged, and students linked this to their code about person-centred care, etc. This was a positive response as well. So feedback from the students was positive, with majority of finding the session both helpful and enjoyable. And the students reported the benefits of sharing their experiences with colleagues from each other's location. There were some issues around technical problems and sort of interaction at the start of the session, where there was a little bit of awkwardness. Students hadn't met each other before. Some of the conversations in the breakout rooms on Zoom were a little bit slow to get going, but largely it was felt to be a positive experience. And here there's some comments from the students, like, it was good that we could hear about different healthcare systems. It was interesting to see how healthcare between Scotland and Singapore is different. But this issue about a slightly awkward interaction and challenges of speaking to people you didn't know on Zoom. Further comments included things like, I loved having the opportunity to talk to people so far away and gain insight into their opinions on the topic of PrEP and HIV, a highlight of the term, and to learn about the differences between the countries. And students were glad to have the opportunity to have a joint session. So overall, we felt that the session was beneficial to both sets of students. And interestingly, when the Singapore students normally come to Glasgow for their overseas immersion programme, they often don't meet nearly as much with our students as we in Glasgow that we would like, just because they're at different stages of the programme. Our students are either on holiday or they're out on placement, so there's not as much interaction as we would like there to be. But students enjoyed the social aspect of the interaction as well as the educational benefit, and it's something that we will strive to continue in the future. Another challenge that we've had in the past is that our students in Glasgow feel, with the time difference, that they don't particularly want to start their teaching at 8 o'clock in the morning, but we've sort of reassured them that actually that isn't a big challenge and that they can get up and be ready to be on Zoom at 8 o'clock. So there's about an 8 hour, I think it's about an 8 hour time difference between Glasgow and Singapore. And what was also good was that so not all our staff based in Glasgow are involved in our Singapore programme, but this was an opportunity for us to be able to have more staff from both institutions working together, and the staff found this enjoyable. So it was good team-based teaching and team-based learning. And our parting thought really is that one of our students said that it's really beautiful that student nurses in Singapore and UK have the same values when it comes to human rights and being ethical. It's really heartwarming when nurses come together with the same beliefs, which we thought was really, a very lovely comment. And here's some references to the session. Okay, thank you very much.
I'm very, very pleased to be presenting to you today, and I'm going to talk to you about a project that we established from Cardiff University with the University of Namibia, and it's called the Namibian Nurse Leadership Project. And you can see below the team of people that worked with me on this project, who I am incredibly thankful to. Okay, so a little bit about the project background, because I want you to know how it originated and the work that we did prior to setting up the leadership project. So fortunately, Cardiff University already has an existing partnership with the University of Namibia. So it was pretty easy for me to start some discussion with the Professor of Nursing at the School of Nursing at UNAM around nurse leadership. And she had raised with me that this was a particular area of deficit for nurses in the country. So what I did to start looking at exactly what was needed was I did a needs analysis in June 2018 and met with around 70 nurses, and you can see that they are from all different dimensions of nursing and at all different levels. And it's important to say that I also went to 3 regions of Namibia. So not only to Windhoek, which is where UNAM is situated, but also to Oshakati and to Rundu, which are far more rural areas in the north of the country. And what came out of that needs analysis was there was a clear need for leadership education. And so I put in for some funding and got a grant from the Wales for Africa Fund, which is run by the Welsh Government. So what we then developed was what we called the Namibian Nurse Leadership Project, and it had several different dimensions to it, because it seemed that through my discussions that it was important to kind of try and get in at all levels in terms of leadership, rather than just starting at the very top, but also to try to get in at the bottom as well. So these are the elements of the project, and there were 5. The first was that we would develop some leadership competencies and some assessment and teaching materials together. The second was that we would set up a buddying scheme between our final year nursing students, and the focus of that was to develop leadership and understanding of leadership, and also to enhance cultural awareness. We had been liaising, and one of the people who did the needs analysis with me was a director of nursing from a health board. And so we had a link into Welsh nurses. So we thought setting up a buddying scheme between Welsh nurses and qualified Namibian nurses could be helpful. We also felt there was a need for education, and so developed and implemented a leadership and health improvement programme for qualified nurses in Namibia. And our final part of the project, to ensure its sustainability, was to actually develop leadership champions who could then cascade that leadership and health improvement education to other nurses within their organisations. So the development of the leadership competencies was quite an easy bit to do, not difficult. We went over, we had a lot of links electronically to look at what we were currently doing in terms of leadership in our respective curricula. And we then got together and developed some joint learning outcomes, and they were based on Health Education England and the leadership model that they have there, which is beginning with self, working with others, and then improving healthcare. We actually didn't manage to develop joint assessment strategies. There were issues with credit rating in our programmes, length of programmes, etc. And we would have had to revise our curricula considerably to have achieved that. So the next part of the project, which is the Student Nurse Buddying Scheme, I think is probably one of the most exciting parts of the programme. So we started by asking for expressions of interest from students in our respective universities. And we planned 5 sessions. And even although, a bit like Sue was just referring to, even although they were facilitated by a tutor, it was primarily student-led wherever possible. Our first one was about getting to know one another and thinking about nursing in another culture. The second was emotional intelligence, a little bit about leadership theory, and then discussion of scenarios from practice. What I would say here is that it really did give students an opportunity, particularly Namibian students, to link with nurses from another country and learn about that culture. It wasn't without its problems. I think if we hadn't had learning technologists involved, the differing VL platforms were quite difficult to deal with, because we wanted to give students questionnaires to complete on emotional intelligence, to give them learning resources so that they could refer to that. And so we ended up using Moodle, and both universities needed to get access to that. Student commitment was difficult actually in light of the other priorities involved in the curricula. So we only actually had 8 involved from Cardiff and 24 from UNAM. Although the students from UNAM were kind of a bit sporadic in their attendance, and the ones you see in the picture here were a kind of constant, and I met these students when I actually went out to Namibia. Our evaluation was very positive, and I think we need to think about continuation of the scheme. So just some of the evaluations, and I think that some of them were really very heartwarming in terms of Namibian students particularly, talking about learning about other people's culture, thinking about one day becoming a nurse in the UK, and one Namibian nursing student saying, interacting with other student nursing students in the UK was one of the best moments of my life. You can see also that the evaluations from Cardiff students were also very positive, with students saying, they were very glad to be part of this special international collaboration. So the whole thing here evaluated very well. The qualified nurse buddying scheme that we established was initially set up between this health board in Wales and 3 regions within Namibia, and we invited 15 from each country to participate. Again, ran 5 sessions which were academically facilitated, and in Wales we also produced some films. So that was a day in the life of a nurse in Wales in community nursing, in accident and emergency and intensive care. And we welcomed clinical scenarios. I would echo what Sue has just said, actually, that we found that the qualified nurses from Namibia were quite reticent in getting involved in the discussion. So it needed quite a lot of prompting for that to happen. So again, the lessons learned from this was that there were great difficulties in establishing connections in more remote parts of Namibia. So these nurses needed to attend a central point which was at a university or a healthcare establishment, so that they could actually access Zoom. As I've said, attendance was variable. We had hoped that students would attend all 5, that nurses would attend all 5 sessions, but there were sometimes, you know, nurses coming in who had only attended 1, etc. We had a very small number of nurses who took part from Wales, actually 4 in total, and that was due to clinical commitments. And we also had low evaluation responses from Namibian nurses. But overall, those who did participate gave some very useful insights into the value of the buddying scheme. Things like, you know, becoming a better role model, provided excellent professional networks, learning about frontline work and staffing in another country. One of the things they'd asked for was explanation and discussion about the differences between leadership and management, and that was one of the sessions that we ran. And the similarities was quite stark, actually, one student said, particularly in the background of such difference, and keeping in touch to share leadership ideas. So the next part of the project was the Leadership and Quality Improvement Workshop, and that was for qualified Namibian nurses. It was a 2-day workshop. Oh, okay. Originally planned to be delivered in 3 regions, and we invited 25 people. These were the aims of the workshop, and they won't come as any surprise, but it was taken out of the needs analysis. Just one of the things I want to point to there is the principles of change management, and using the PDSA cycle, which, you know, we use quite a lot in the UK when we're talking about quality improvement. These are some of the change management projects that nurses actually developed, or at least indicated that they would develop, and came up with a plan to do so out of the workshop. And you can see these are quite vast, from infection control through to correct medication, to discharge planning, reducing number of needle stick injuries, etc. So we were really pleased with the areas there. The evaluations were that they really enjoyed learning from one another, that within the group, you know, they sort of developed really good connections. We did a pre and post evaluation questionnaire, and we noted great differences in learning and understanding about leadership. And that again was really, really pleasing to see that an understanding of leadership and certainly change management had developed. The lessons learned was that we had difficulty in recruiting, and in the end we only ran 1 workshop in the capital of Namibia. 25 were expected and only 11 came. 3 of those volunteered to become change champions. However, COVID has now affected continuation of that project and follow-up of change management. And in summary, I think maybe we were over-ambitious, trying to train 75 nurses in different locations. If we'd used a blended approach, it may have been more successful. Student buddying is certainly a way of connecting students from different countries to help develop cultural awareness. Qualified nurse buddying, I think, is problematic due to clinical commitments and access to technology. And we really need to give some thought to the sustainability of positive outcomes, particularly in the light of other priorities by healthcare institutions, the NHS in Wales and healthcare in Namibia. And thank you very much for listening.
Good afternoon, my name's Eleanor Cochrane and I'm a medical student at Cardiff University. I'm grateful to be here today presenting the findings of my research project, investigating how we can better use the platform Peerwise at our medical school. I undertook this project as part of my intercalated degree in medical education and would like to thank the faculty on the course for their support, especially my supervisors, Professor Smith and Dr. Matthews. So to set the scene, this research was undertaken at Cardiff School of Medicine in the United Kingdom. The course can be divided into years 1 to 2, which are the preclinical years, applying case-based learning methods, followed by clinical rotations in years 3 to 5. Medical students around the world are faced with the same problem. They have limited time and high pressure to learn large volumes of information, and so often resort to surface or strategic learning approaches. An atmosphere of competition that we commonly find in medical schools is also seen in the online collaborative learning platform Peerwise. So Peerwise is an online collaborative learning platform that allows a cohort of students to generate their own multiple choice question bank. It was introduced to Cardiff medical students in 2013 and was first made in Auckland, New Zealand, and so is used around the world. Peerwise can be described as a community of practice promoting deep learning. So students learn from one another through sharing insights and resources and asking for help. Currently, students at Cardiff University receive an introductory lecture where they receive tips on using Peerwise and then are instructed to log in, write their first question. From there onwards, they have autonomy over how much they engage with it between years 1 to 3. Much like on social media, students can explore the platform and we see kind of vast differences between how they might engage, with some just reaping the benefits of the community of practice without giving back, and have therefore been compared to lurkers that we see on Twitter who just scroll without inputting themselves. Previous research at Cardiff Medical School identified that students are using Peerwise far more in the days leading up to their exams. So we can see just before the formative exam, there's this peak, and then even more so before their summative exams. This suggestion that students are cramming, coupled with conversations I've had in my own experience of using Peerwise and conversations with my peers, lead us to suspect that students aren't using Peerwise for deep learning. And so to address this problem, we had 2 key objectives. We wanted to evaluate fully how Cardiff medical students are using Peerwise and how this compares to other medical schools and other university faculties too. And also to design an evidence-based workshop based on principles of scaffolding and peer-assisted learning. So numerous universities, they implement different methods, and the 3 or 2 key ones that we see are summative and scaffolding. And peer-assisted learning is one that we had particular interest in that hasn't previously been implemented. So in terms of summative marking systems, universities often award between 5 to 10% of a module grade in order to motivate engagement. And the marking rubrics can vary, such that they might award full marks for just completing the task, or perhaps award highest marks for the highest quality questions written. But the problem that we see with this is that kind of, again, the day before the deadline, we see the most submissions, and also that when you look at Bloom's taxonomy, the taxonomic level of questions written just before the deadline is often dropping. So we wanted to use a scaffolding approach so that students feel competent to write questions and find an intrinsic motivator rather than this extrinsic one. Previous studies have found that a scaffolding approach can lead to high quality question writing. And so we then wanted to couple this with PAL. PALS is an umbrella term that simply describes students learning from other students. As well as competence, Ryan and Desi's self-determination theory describes relatedness as a key component of intrinsic motivation. And so the social learning appeal of PAL compared to teacher-led instruction might increase intrinsic motivation to participate on Peerwise. We felt that our avid users of Peerwise would be most likely equipped to explain the system to their younger peers. And assuming this position would be that of a peer tutor, which is the most widely recognised form of peer-assisted learning. Yet despite these matters, we find that this is probably the first report of using PAL or peer tutoring to increase engagement with peerwise. So we collected our data using an educational action research strategy. EAR conceptualizes these successive cycles consisting of planning, action, observation, and reflection. As I said, this was part of my research project. So initially I set out hoping to answer the question, can student peer review improve question quality? But such is the way that students are using peerwise that it was actually quite difficult to answer this question, finding that they had low engagement with the activities. And so it was reflection upon this that then led to the research I'm presenting today. In the second stage, we collected data from two sources. Firstly, we extracted data from peerwise for students enrolled on consecutive Year 1 courses between 2013 and 2018. And finally, I designed an interactive workshop applying a scaffolding and peer-assisted learning approach. Students during this workshop wrote a question and evaluated a question, and the students completed pre- and post-session questionnaires, which we then used thematic analysis to analyse the free text responses. So just a note on the preliminary study. So the way it worked was we recruited 40 students who consented to participate, and they would go on to write questions in a bespoke peerwise course and then peer review one another's questions, hoping that they could improve the quality of them and then submit them to their whole year group cohort. But despite recruiting 40 students, only 13 actually completed tasks as intended. And the students weren't given any direction on how to give peer feedback. And due to this, we found that most of the comments were just positive and didn't have any suggestions for improvement. The students also had limited vocabulary to describe components of questions, suggesting they didn't understand kind of the anatomy of an SBA question. And students valued good quality explanations, which were clear and reference to useful resources. So moving on now to the descriptive data taken from peerwise. This graph demonstrates the number of students that have engaged with each activity on at least one occasion. As you can see, the majority of students have engaged in answering questions, but nearer half of students, and definitely less than 2/3, writing questions or using the commenting features. So we know that we have fewer students writing questions than answering them, but even the students who are writing questions are writing far fewer than they are answering. And so I'm presenting the median here because we do have a couple of extraordinary students in every year group that skew the mean, with students writing up to 500 questions in a year. The top 10 most prolific question writers wrote over 2,500 questions between them, accounting for 1/3 of all questions written by our students. Using data from the preliminary study, as well as the findings from the literature review, I developed the hour-long workshop. Despite finding a gap in the students' timetable and advertising at their lectures, advertising on Facebook, on their Facebook group, only 9 students attended the pilot workshop. The feedback, however, was overwhelmingly positive, and thematic analysis of their questionnaire responses revealed 4 key themes. They valued explicit methods for giving feedback, like the sandwich method, and a learning objective-centered approach to writing questions. They felt that the workshop should be compulsory, feeling more equipped and motivated to write questions and feedback on peerwise. And they expressed an interest in assessment literacy as well, wanting to think like an examiner and understand more complex question structures. Often their responses would reference preparing for exams though, rather than just learning from peerwise alone. So are Cardiff first year medical students using peerwise for deep learning? As I've said, our results show that about half of students are engaging in question writing, while most are engaging in answering. And numerous adult learning theories would suggest that writing questions stimulates deeper learning than answering questions. And additionally, writing questions might only be of benefit when those questions they write are specific to a topic that an exam challenges. And so to be of benefit, perhaps with our students, with our case-based learning structure, if there's 6 cases, they would need to write 6 questions, but only 16% of our students have written 6 or more questions. And if students are writing questions of low taxonomic grade, then these questions that they're answering might not be challenging them enough to achieve high order thinking. The workshop was well received, but would benefit from more examples and better description of evidence behind writing questions. And the students expressed that they were likely to write more questions and felt more confident now that they're equipped with this framework. But as I say, this low attendance was worse than I feared. It's to be expected and shown by other literature and other examples in the UK even, that people don't really come to optional peer-wise support sessions.
1 minute left.
Okay, thank you. And I think that this really highlights that students aren't interested in engaging in peer-wise without extrinsic motivators, like the looming exams. So finally, going forward, it would be valuable to apply the feedback from the pilot and then trial it with the whole year group in the curriculum timetable. This will allow us to generate more feedback and continue to improve it. As I said, this educational action research, we continue to cycle and improve. More extensive review of students' commenting behaviours on peerwise would also provide insights that can support this review and give us more substance to teach on. And finally, the literature review surrounding summative assessment to motivate students' engagement with peerwise was particularly interesting. How does it impact on question quality and how does it impact on results in SBA exams? And so further research into this area, as well as a systematic review, would be very interesting indeed. And that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening, and these are my references.
Good afternoon all. First of all, I would like to thank for the organizers to give this wonderful opportunity to share my research findings on the peer-assisted learning. Okay, so let us introduce the topic and why I have selected this topic. And because the nursing profession, basically it needs very good examination skills. So this is a very great challenge to inculcate these skills to the nursing students. That's why it needs, because during the student period of the nursing program, they need to master the certain skills and to be a like expert when they complete the nursing course. So when I was teaching this physical examination course for the second year nursing students, and I thought maybe when we teach the physical examination skills in the lab, and the grasping of the skills are very slower among the students. So I thought maybe they may be very not that much comfortable with the faculty, so they are not very much freer approach towards the faculty to learn these skills. So during the first assessment, I thought the score was very less, and they did not show that much of skills during the examination, the practical examination in the physical examination course. So I thought to rectify this issue, maybe something can be introduced where the students can feel free to gain this access, to gain the skills during the demonstration period. So based on this issue, I was thinking which one is a better method to improve the basic skills, the examination skills in these particular physical examination course in the second year. So when I was reviewing the peer-assisted learning, I have reviewed many literatures, right from maybe approximately the 15 years. Like I have set a point of the past 15 years reviews, what it says about the peer-assisted learning. So when I come to know these reviews, and it was very good and it is very beneficial, especially for the nursing students. And it enhances in many aspects, especially the self-confidence and it is very less dependent on the faculty, then they will be more involved in the practice during the practice session, and it is a mode of improving the collaborative skills among the peers, and it decreases sense of anxiety during the practice as well as in the examination. So based on this idea, and I just implemented this peer learning strategy as an intervention in my action research. So, and therefore it was found to be effective and implemented, and it was found to be very good outcome in my study. So these are the basic research questions I have formulated to conduct the research study. So to what extent the peer-assisted learning affect in improving skill demonstration and self-confidence among the undergraduate second-year nursing students, and what are the attitude towards this peer-assisted learning, and what are the perceptions under the towards the peer-assisted learning. So I have conducted 2 cycles in this action research, that is a pre-cycle, cycle 1 and cycle 2. So as I gave the introduction and the pre-cycle, what is the usual routine? Normally, I used to take a lecture, and followed by I used to take the students into the skill lab and show all the demonstrations. And end of the demonstration, I will call one volunteer student to do the raid demonstration, and all the other students, they will be observer and observe the skill. That's it, because the credit is very less, and we did not give a chance to all the students to practice this one. And and because of this, only one they're observing, and they failed to retain the key aspects of the psychomotor skills, and they scored very less marks. So cycle 1, I thought I will introduce the peer-assisted learning, and followed by the demo practice with the checklist. So this is the checklist which I have prepared exclusively for the research purpose, and it will help the students to follow the steps without missing any steps during the practice, during the peer practice. So this is the checklist which was prepared by me for the examination purpose. So, and after this one, the practices, end of the cycle 1, I have assessed their self-confidence and the attitude towards peer-assisted learning, and also I have done the focus group interview. And in the cycle 2, after 2 weeks, so the interval between cycle 1 and cycle 2 is 2 weeks. So the cycle 2 also, I followed the same steps: initially lecture, followed by the faculty demo, and divided the students as a peers, and they will be starting to practice among themselves. The only thing what I have done, I have withdrawn the demo practice checklist, so which was used in the cycle 1, and I have withdrawn the practice checklist in cycle 2. The same assessed the self-confidence, attitude, and end of the cycle 2, and also the focus group interview was adapted. Okay. The methodology for this study, it includes both the quantitative and the qualitative study design, and it includes only the 17 undergraduates. Unfortunately, during that time, the last semester, the group only, the students is a very small group, and only 17 students. So non-probability convenience sampling was adopted, and the data collection method, which includes both the quantitative and the qualitative method. And as I said, what I have done in the cycle 1 and the cycle 2, the same thing what I have depicted here, the same. And the data collection tools, I have used 3 tools. All these 3 tools developed by the researcher, but the tools was validated by the nursing experts in the Bahrain, and especially they specialized in the nursing field they gave their very good validity for this tool, and I have used this tool. So first one is the self-confidence tool, which consists of 3 domains: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains, and it consists of 34 questions. 34 questions, and it was a Likert scale, 5-point Likert scale. The second one is the attitude scale, and which is consists of the 24 questions, and also the same like 5-point Likert scale, and the examination checklist. So examination checklist, the practice checklist are same. So what is the difference between the practice checklist and the exam checklist? Only the grading was not given in the practice checklist, so which was used by the students during their practices, especially during the peer practice. So these are the tools which were used for collecting the data. Okay. So regarding the characteristics of the sample and the demographic variable, majority of the students, and they belong to the age group of 20 to 21 years, that is 61%. And the majority of the students were female students, that is 66.6. And the equal percentage of the students, they had the experience of, they never had experience of the teaching as a peers, as well as the peer tutor and the peer tutor. So this table, which depicts the comparison of the skill score, that is the skill which was assessed during the practical exam at the end of the cycle 1 and the cycle 2. Okay, so the repeated measures of the ANOVA score, which shows there is a difference in the mean score from pre-cycle to the cycle 1 and cycle 1 to the cycle 2. So there is a gradual increase in the mean scores compared to all the cycles, pre-cycle, cycle 1 and the cycle 2. So which was very significant at the P level of 0.001 level. Okay, and the bond friendly test also, which compares the pre-cycle versus the cycle 1 and pre-cycle versus cycle 2, which is very significant. But I did not check the bond friendly test for comparing the cycle 1 to the cycle 2, which was not that much significant. Okay. So this this table, which explains the comparison of overall mean score of the pre-cycle, cycle 1 and the cycle 2, that is of the mean difference is 8.33. So it is also very significant, which is supporting my study results. Okay, so this is the grade wise of the 17 students, how many the grades which they scored in different from A to C plus. Okay, so here from the pre-test versus cycle 1, and which shows a very significant grade improvement, as well as the pre-test versus cycle 2 also, there is a good grade improvement. Okay. Then the comparison of the nursing students' self-confidence. So as I told you, the tool, which consists of 3 components: cognitive, affective, and the psychomotor domains in the self-confidence. So I got very good results of the cognitive domain from cycle 1 to cycle 2, and the affective also cycle 1 to cycle 2, and the psychomotor also cycle 1 to cycle 2. So the yellow, which depicts the cycle 1, and the green, which depicts the cycle 2. So when compared from all the domains of the cognitive, affective, and the psychomotor domains, there is a significant rise in the self-confidence the score. Actually, here the practice checklist, which is prepared by the examiner for this peer-assisted learning project, and which does not influence the score, the significant score from pre-cycle to cycle 1 or cycle 1 to cycle 2. Even if I withdraw the practice checklist in the cycle 2, it does not affect their score performance in terms of the exam performance, self-confidence, and attitude. So what I just inferred from this study results, once they are comfortable with the peers, and automatically they will be very comfortable in learning new skills, especially the physical examination score skills for the nursing students. It is very, very important, as I told you before. And so they are very confident as the time improves, as the time goes, and automatically they are very, very interested to learn many things, especially the newer things. So the checklist, the supplementary checklist, it does not have any influence over their performance. So here, this is all the same, the mean difference which I depicted here, the same, the cycle 1 and cycle 2 in terms of the cognitive domain, the mean difference is 2.94 between cycle 1 and cycle 2, affective also 2.07, psychomotor 1.80, and overall there is a very good mean difference of 7.2 in all the 3 domains. So I have got the result of which is very significant in all the 3 domains, as well as in the overall. The significance is P is equal to 0.001 score, which is highly significant. Okay, so this is the percentage of the score. This is the percentage, how much of percentage the maximum score which we have gained from the 3 domains in terms of cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. The overall percentage is 4.28%. Okay, so this is the attitude of the students towards the peer-assisted learning in terms of cycle 1 and the cycle 2 through the Maximus test, which shows the very good improvement. That is, a cycle 1, the good were only 61%, whereas in the cycle 2, it is only 22.22%. Why? Because there was a very good improvement in the towards the attitude score, because the cycle 1, the very good is only 38, whereas in the cycle 2, it is 77.7%, which shows that the peer-assisted learning has a significant impact and among the nursing students. and it really supports what the reviews I have done for conducting this study. So I also found that, yes, the peer-assisted learning has a significant, especially for the nursing profession, it has got a very good impact on the learning new skills in the nursing field.
1 minute left.
Yeah, I just am going to finish. Thank you. So the summary of the results, which shows majority of samples are the female, and most of the students revealed that they did not experience as a peer tutor or tutee. And PAL had a significant improvement on the practical exam performance and improved grade. And the exam scores, that is the skill part. The exam score is the skill part. Self-confidence and attitude was not influenced by the checklist. The researcher prepared the checklist for the peer-assisted learning, and which was utilized by the students in cycle 1 and withdrawn during the cycle 2. And PAL had a great impact on the self-confidence among the students, and it helps to develop the good attitude towards the PAL strategy. So nursing students are very much interested in the PAL approach. So this is the qualitative analysis part I have done. This is the questions which were prepared by the researcher, and these are the emerged themes I have emerged out of this thematic analysis. So these are my references, and thank you so much for the listeners, and also for the opportunity given to me to share my research findings. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lana Dardari. I am a fourth-year medical student in RCSI Bahrain. Today, I will be presenting my summer research project, which is done in RCSI Bahrain, titled "Language Interpretation Devices in Clinical Medical Examinations." Here is our research team: myself, Ms. Alat Basha, which she is a medical student; Dr. Ibrahim Kayal, he is a medical graduate; Dr. Wendy Madison, Health of Student Development and Wellbeing students in RCSI Bahrain; Dr. Jean Hughes, and Dr. Anne Donahoe. And this study was funded by RCSI Bahrain. So this study explores language interpretation in the setting of clinical medical examinations. Being in a very multicultural setting, such as RCSI Bahrain, language barriers between students and patients in a clinical medical exam can pose difficulties for both parties. All medical examinations are in English, which is the official language of the university. However, the patients in those clinical examinations usually speak little to no English, and generally speak Arabic, for example. The study was divided into 3 interrelated action research cycles. Action research cycle 1 assessed the benefits and the challenges of using a medical translator in examination settings. Action research cycle 2, which is the focus of this presentation, explored the use of a digital interpretation device in clinical examinations as a way to replace medical interpreters, which is the focus of this presentation. And in Action Research Cycle 3, the findings from Action Research Cycle 1 and 2 were used to develop specific guidelines for language interpretation during examinations. Hence, as a team, this study was conducted with the aim of improving language interpretation processes within the context of clinical medical examinations. So this study, as I said, formed part of a larger investigation into language translation in clinical examinations. It explores language translation / interpretation devices in clinical medical examinations, an instant in-ear translation device, which is shown on the slide here. This is the one that we used in the study. Was used within a mock clinical medical examination to explore the challenges and the opportunities of using translation devices in clinical medical examinations. So we have conducted 2 mock long case examinations where students must take history, perform physical examination, formulate a diagnosis, and recommend a treatment plan. We have also included examiners to join this mock exam just to give their opinions on the technology that was used. The patients in this mock examination, as I said before, generally speak little to no English. which is usually how it is in the actual medical exams. As all examinations are conducted through English, bilingual hospital or university staff act as interpreters between the student and the patient. While this process has been going on for a long time in the university, students have had positive feedback about this process. Now the question is, can technology replace those human interpreters? So how this device works is that the in-ear translation device would connect to the student's phone through Bluetooth, and then one ear device is put into the student's ear, and then the other is put into the patient's ear, and then the student says a sentence in English, and then the in-ear translation device picks that up, and then the translation is translated into Arabic for the patient and the patient's ear. There's also a feature where whatever was said during the conversation is transcribed onto the student's phone, and you can see the conversation, and I will show a demonstration of that in the later slides. So in terms of literature reviews, there are many different translation apps available on the market. However, there are very few studies that have evaluated the use of translation apps in medical and healthcare settings. And even fewer have compared multiple translation apps or examined the context in which their use may be suitable. One study have reviewed Google Translate in the medical settings and have found inaccuracies in translation when used in a clinical setting. Another study was conducted. It was a 6-week trial of a German translation app called X-Prompt2 Multilingual Assistance. It's designed for the use in healthcare settings. Nursing staff were surveyed, and they reported that the app was helpful for communicating with patients who spoke another language. Another study was, it reviewed 15 translation apps found on the Apple's iTunes Store. The apps were evaluated for their suitability in clinical settings, and it was found that only 2 out of 15 were suitable. Furthermore, translation applications can be useful in clinical settings. However, according to the literature, the use of a professional interpreter is still considered the gold standard. So the research questions are, is using speech recognition technology efficient to mediate language interpretation requirements during a mock clinical examination? And another question that we can pose is, can translation technology replace interpreters in a clinical medical examination? In terms of the methods and data collection, this is what I described before, the action research cycles. Our aim of this presentation is action research cycle 2. The aim was to examine the use of an instant translation device in a mock clinical examination setting. The data collection was, so basically we got 8 alumni and 4 final year students to participate in a mock examination using the in-ear translation device. The process was evaluated by conducting a focus group interview, which is an interview consisting of multiple individuals, and we did that with the students. And then with the examiners, we had 2 examiners, and we did a semi-structured interview, which is basically an interview that's not made up of lists. It's just, it's based on conversations. And the data was analyzed by utilizing thematic analysis devised by Brana and Clark, which will be shown in the next slide. So here are the themes that we have devised throughout the entire study. But as I said before, we will be focusing on one part of the study, which is the technology part. And the theme we will be focusing on number 4, technological solutions. So the findings of the study was that the in-ear translation device had limited applicability within an examination setting. It had a variety of technical issues. It picked up background noise which interfered with the translation process. It exhibited inaccuracy of translation due to the range of Arabic dialects in use. Just a fun fact for all the non-Arabic speakers out there. Arabic is one language, but depends on what country you're from. There are different dialects in use, and different dialects have different words that other dialects might not be in use. So like there would be a language barriers there within the same language. So the technology or the in-ear device translation itself didn't pick up the different dialects of Arabic. It also did not work properly when participants were wearing the hijab, which is the Islamic scarf. Some students said that it was uncomfortable to wear. Some students thought that it was unhygienic due to the requirement to share earpieces. As I said before, one was given to the patient, one was given to the student, and then they would share between students and between patients. However, on a positive note, it generated a PDF file of the translation, which was welcomed by the student. And this is an example of what you would see on the student's phone. Therefore, the participants reported that the mobile device had limited applicability. This was primarily due to connectivity issues associated with using several devices in proximity. One student commented that, quote unquote, "I feel like there was no flow because the device kept disconnecting and reconnecting. So it was very hard to maintain a flow of conversation with the patient." On a positive note, the participants could see the potential advantage of using mobile technology and recognize the value of conducting future research in this area. However, there was a widespread agreement that an interpreter was significantly preferable to using a mobile device or app. So in terms of the discussion, the findings of our study demonstrated that the mobile device was not preferred by students, mainly due to issues associated with accuracy and connectivity. There was a widespread agreement that an interpreter was significantly preferable to using a technological app or device. Participants also recognized the potential of translation technology and further research in this area. These findings are consistent with previous research, which demonstrate that an interpreter remains the gold standard for medical discussions and interactions. Translation applications may have a role in reducing language barriers in everyday healthcare communication, and there is a need to explore utilizing language interpretation applications within the healthcare setting. In terms of recommendations for practice, the first recommendation that we have came up with as a team is mobile technology and software may provide some solutions to language translation issues in the future. However, at this point in time, utilizing a human translator is preferable to using a translation device. The second recommendation is that a key element of future research should include an investigation as to the feasibility and efficacy of utilizing various mobile technologies and language interpretation software applications within clinical medical examinations. The third recommendation is there should be specific guidelines developed for using translation technology in clinical medical examinations in the first place. So the conclusions of this study are, the use of an interpreter remains the gold standard. There needs to be further research on potential use of interpreting technology in clinical medical examinations and/or settings, and many translation apps are available on the market. However, further research is needed to determine which is the most applicable in clinical medical examinations and/or settings. And here are the references, and thank you so much.